Well, the shortage of detectives in the SAPS is without a doubt a cause for concern in the fight against crime. There are less than 18,000 detectives across the country. Well, the police service has lost over 8,000 detectives since 2017, and the DA has described the shortage as a crisis and says it must be addressed. DA MP Andrew Whitfield joins us now to discuss this further. Thank you so much for your time, Andrew. I think, first and foremost, can we just, maybe discuss the significance of this drastic decline in detectives in the country from your point of view?
Absolutely. The decline in detectives from about 26,000 in 2016 down to 17,600 was revealed in Parliament this last week. I asked the National Police Commissioner, and he revealed these absolutely stunning and shocking revelations because, we have a crisis in SAPS, as we've said, and the implications of that crisis for the South African Police Service and the South African public, more importantly, cannot be underestimated. Our detectives are some of our most highly skilled police officers who are required to ensure that investigations are conducted properly, effectively, efficiently, to make sure that we collect all the correct evidence, that evidence is prosecutable in court, that the NPA has a strong case to work with. And we need to drill down to the reasons. Why are the detectives leaving the South African Police Service in such numbers? 8,000 detectives lost to South Africa over the last 6 years is absolutely a crisis, but it is a crisis more broadly for our criminal justice system and to ensure that there are consequences for criminals, that when we lock them up, they are locked up according to the sentence they're supposed to serve because of good detective work. And we just don't have that at the moment.
Why would you say or would you rather say that there's a lack of, wanting to get those posts refilled? Because, we have this huge loss when it comes to our detectives, but are these posts being filled, or do you think there's just a lack of actually, not a necessity being placed on the fact that these posts need to be filled?
Well, they are trying to fill them from the new trainees, but that's also not tremendously helpful. They are forcing senior police officers onto early retirement. I receive emails from people demanding or desperate, rather, to be re-enlisted into the SAPS to bring their experience back to the police. You cannot put a price on experience, and the skills in detective services are accumulated over a number of years. And so it's not just the vacancies that need to be filled. It's the missing institutional memory which we've lost in the South African Police Service as a result of this horrific attrition of skills and memory, institutional memory and experience. And that is the nub of it. So yes, they are recruiting for those vacancies. I was tremendously pleased to hear from the National Police Commissioner that they are trying to re-enlist some detectives back into detective services to train and to upskill those new trainees, which will be absolutely critical if we're going to ensure that we bring the conviction rate into a decent level. It's far too low at the moment, and detectives play a critical role there. I asked the President at the beginning of the year whether they would consider re-enlisting these lost skills that have been forced out of SAPS in many cases, and also as a result of low morale. People are getting promotions who don't deserve promotions above people who have the skills and experience. And so people have sought opportunities elsewhere. So they've only re-enlisted 68 detectives that have been put on early retirement or had been retrenched or for whatever other reason last year or over the past few years. And 68 is just a drop in the ocean when you've lost so many thousands over the last 6 years.
Do you think this issue could, affect the country's crime rate in the future?
Well, absolutely. If there aren't consequences for criminals who need to be locked up, then they will continue to operate with impunity and with increasing confidence. The skills deficit within SAPS is something that needs to be absolutely urgently prioritized and dealt with. Unfortunately, we're now facing more budget cuts as the country runs out of money. Critical service delivery departments like SAPS are going to be having to chop their budgets by about 10%, which is almost 10 billion rand for the South African Police Service. So unfortunately, the short term doesn't look positive. We'll hear lots of rhetoric from the ANC and from members and ministers in government, but the reality at the end of the day is we've lost 8,000 detectives in 6 years. We're continuing to lose experience and skills. We're not losing the corrupt police officers who get promoted above their colleagues. Those are the people that are the problem. But we absolutely have to rebuild the institutional capacity of SAPS to improve the conviction rate. And when we improve the conviction rate, criminals will start to feel that that good is defeating evil in South Africa, and that there will be consequences for their criminal actions. At the moment, criminals feel emboldened by a criminal justice system which has been denuded of these critical skills.
Do you think there should be steps put in place, to address this issue, and what those steps should actually then be?
Absolutely. I mean, in the State of the Nation address debate at the beginning of the year, I challenged the president, as I said earlier in this interview, I challenged the president to re-enlist the lost skills. That is an absolute urgent priority. They need to make sure that if they're not re-enlisting people to serve, that they are hiring people back on contract to train the new detectives. They need to, the experience and skills that we've lost need to come back to pass that on to a new generation of detectives. It's not just about how many detectives we have, that is critical, but it is also about the quality of detective skills that we have. And so training is an absolutely urgent priority. The inability of detective services to meet their targets was also absolutely horrific in this last financial year. I think they, in terms of dismantling organized criminal syndicates, they only met 20% of their target, which indicates that organized criminal syndicates are operating at a highest level of sophistication and are simply not afraid at all of being caught because SAPS has lost the capacity to do so. So specialized skills training, absolutely critical, re-enlisting lost skills as far as possible and bringing those back for the training purposes, and then making sure that we root out the corruption in SAPS and reward those police officers who deserve the promotions. The morale in detectives, amongst detectives in South Africa, is incredibly low. Many detectives with case dockets of more than 300 case dockets at any given time that they have to investigate. It's absolutely impossible to operate in that environment, and they don't get paid overtime. These are some of the most specialized skills that we require to improve our conviction rate, yet they don't get paid overtime, and often many of them are working 18, 20-hour days.
Mr. Whitfield, we always see, Minister Bekele, he's always saying, when we do hear of him saying, how can we address certain crime issues in certain areas, it's always more boots on the ground, more boots on the ground. So what I'm getting from what you are saying is that we don't just need more boots on the ground, but we also need skilled people in the field, detectives in the field that can address serious crimes when it comes to murders and violent crimes, to also make sure that we have these criminals convicted and make sure that we have the right people in the field to then address these serious crimes. Would you say then the problem isn't more boots on the ground, but it is a lack of skills in the South African Police Department?
Well, it's a bit of both. I think we do need more boots on the ground from a visible policing point of view. The citizen to policing ratio is expanding every single day. It's one police officer to over 400 South African citizens. That's not sustainable. We need to get that closer to 250 citizens to every police officer. And so that is something that is extremely concerning. Visible policing does require boots on the ground, but it also requires the rubber to hit the road, if I can put it that way, because our vehicles are in the workshops and not being serviced. Up to 26% of detective services vehicles are sitting in workshops in some provinces in the country. So even when we have the detectives, there aren't the vehicles to get to the crime scenes, to collect the evidence, and to make sure the investigations are done properly. So we actually have a systemic institutional management failure. And the minister spends far too much time parading himself in front of TV cameras, traipsing all over crime scenes, potentially contaminating those crime scenes, instead of sitting behind a desk with his senior generals and saying, guys, we've got a management problem here. We need to sort out the internal systems. We need to repair the systemic dysfunction within their systems. We need to make sure that supply chain operates properly, that we get our vehicles out of the garages, onto the streets, to support our men and women in blue and our communities who live in fear every single day. And so the management element absolutely has to be dealt with. And yes, highly skilled individuals don't want to come to work for SAPS. There needs to be a culture change in SAPS that excites people to come and serve their country, to do their national service, to give back to this incredible country by making it safer for all South Africans so that we can prosper as a nation together. The function of the South African Police Service in this regard is so absolutely critical, because as long as South Africans live in fear and they don't trust the police, we will never be able to prosper.
All right,
and so SAPS's function beyond policing is absolutely critical.
All right, thank you so much. That was DA MP Andrew Whitfield. Thank you so much for your input there, Mr. Whitfield.